Wow, thank you. Hey, all right. Thank you, Chase, for that very kind introduction. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to chapel. You know, there's an old story that comes down to us in various forms through the years about a little eaglet that got separated from its parents at birth. And it was raised by a bunch of turkeys in a barnyard in Iowa. Well, at first, the little eaglet didn't know the difference. It ate what the turkeys ate. It talked like the turkeys communicated. And everything was fine. The food they ate made this eagle grow fat and slow. And, you know, if he'd been out in the wild where he was intended to be, he would have grown strong and lean. But again, he learning the lifestyle habits of the turkeys, he became kind of bored with that. But he figured maybe this is just the way life is meant to be. But sure enough, occasionally there'd be a stirring inside, and he would wonder if perhaps he had been made for more than life in the barnyard. But those feelings quickly subsided, and as the months passed, he became more and more comfortable with life among the turkeys. But one day, as he was just about grown up, he had an experience that rocked his world. One day, he saw flying overhead a mighty eagle. It sliced through the air with amazing precision. He couldn't believe how majestic and graceful it was. And when it gave that powerful cry, wow, something rose up inside of him. He'd never felt this way before. He began to flap his wings out of some deep primal instinct. But then some of the turkeys began to squawk as if to say, "Who are you? Who are you showing off like that?" But he kept flapping those wings until finally he flew several feet off the ground. He couldn't believe it. It was exhilarating. He'd never had this experience before, and soon he was as high as the trees in the barnyard. His friends, the turkeys, looked so small beneath him as he continued awkwardly flapping his wings and getting a little bit higher. It continued 3, then 4 minutes. But he wondered how that thing so far above him could do this with such little effort, it seemed. But as he was about to go higher, he heard the farmer's familiar call. The farmer had come to feed the turkeys their afternoon corn, and all of them were gathering around. And so the young turkey was immediately brought back to reality. Never having landed before, he didn't know how, and so he virtually fell to the earth with a thud. And then he joined the turkeys around the troughs as the farmer fed them. The turkeys squawked, "You show off, you can't fly. You're made for the barnyard. You'll never be able to soar." And he couldn't help but wonder if maybe they were right. The next day, he looked for the eagle overhead but couldn't find him. A week later, he saw the eagle soaring majestically overhead once again. But the moment he began to flap his wings, he got so much hassle from the turkeys, he decided maybe it wasn't worth it after all. And as the weeks and months passed, sadly, this eagle, born to soar thousands of feet above the earth, grew more content just to live among the turkeys. And the truth is, he never flew again. Now, I want to return to that story at the end of our comments this morning. I guess you could say the moral of that little story is you can't soar like an eagle if you hang with turkeys, right? The lesson it teaches that nothing impacts us more than the company we keep. I understand that this spring in your chapel services, you're kind of focusing on the book of Proverbs. That's exciting to me. It's certainly one of my favorite books in the Bible. And this morning, I want to highlight one of those little sleeper verses in Proverbs. It doesn't get a lot of attention or press, But I believe this little verse is packed with dynamite. I'm going to be so bold as to say that if we could get a hold of the power in this one little verse, it could literally change our lives and the trajectory of our lives in a major way. Here it is, Proverbs 13, verse 20. It says, "The one who walks with the wise grows wise, but a companion of fools suffers harm." You can't soar like an eagle if you're always just hanging with turkeys. Now, admittedly, we don't have total control over that, do we? We can't control the people that we're around. We can't always choose that. 4 weeks ago, a beautiful young college student walked up to me after one of our services at church. Her name is T. Everybody just calls her T. Her real name is kind of long, and so she just kind of prefers people call her T. 22 years old, university student, works at one of the malls in Albany at a very popular restaurant. Very gifted young woman. And yet she came with a burden. She shared with me some of the really nasty things that people say to her at work and some of the horrible things they do. And she said at one point, "I wish I could just get rid of all the people I work with because I love the customers and they love me. If I just didn't have to work with these people and kind of do life with them." After hearing her story, I encouraged her maybe to consider staying for a while because with her kind of strength and influence, I believe she can impact that environment and literally change the culture at work. Now, she can always get another job, but as long as she's there, it is what it is. The people we walk with, the people we do life with, this verse says, that we hang out with, whether we've chosen them directly or not, have a huge impact on the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. So for the next few minutes, I just want to reflect with you on this verse and give you some takeaways, some things that I believe come right out of this verse and its powerful meaning. First of all, I would say to you that this is a proverb. It's not a universal absolute. That's a great thing to remember, by the way, when you're dealing with the Proverbs. If you don't remember this, you're going to end up with some pretty wacky theology and probably disillusionment along the way. Always when I'm teaching on Proverbs, someone will inevitably walk up and say, "But Pastor, do you believe that this is true in every single case?" And the answer is usually no. Proverbs are these pithy observations about how life generally works. And the key word there is generally. For instance, Proverbs 15:1, "A gentle answer turns away wrath." Now, is God really saying there that if someone is angry with me and I just have the self-control to speak back gently and kindly to them, is God saying that He's promising He's going to come down, twist their arm, violate their free will, and force them to act kindly back toward me just because I did the right thing? Is God saying that because I did the right thing, He's going to make them do the right thing? I hope we all know the answer to that is absolutely not. This is a statement about how life generally works. If someone is being obnoxious and angry, and someone has the grace and the self-control to answer kindly, what happens? Usually, the person realizes, "Oh my goodness, I'm being a jerk." And usually, they calm down too. You say, "Wow, that didn't work with my verbally abusive father. When he was angry and coming down on me and I gave a kind answer, he got even more angry." I hear you. There are exceptions, aren't there? But the exceptions don't nullify the principle. That's what Proverbs are. They're proverbs, not promises. Now, I wish we had time to look at some of the promises in the Bible. There's awesome promises. Things that God states that are true 100% of the time. Most of them, by the way, have to do with God's character, who He is, and how He's chosen to relate to us. But that little book in our Bible, found between Psalms and Ecclesiastes, is not the book of promises. It's the book of Proverbs. And let me say it again. If we don't understand that, we're going to end up with some pretty sloppy theology and possibly a lot of personal disillusionment. It is proverbially true. We tend to become a whole lot like the people we hang out with the most. A second observation about influence I'd like to make is that it can work both ways. It cuts both ways, either good or bad. Now, my assumption today is that many of you probably grew up as churchgoers. And in church, we've tended to only emphasize the negative part of influence or peer pressure. Probably every parent's favorite verse is 1 Corinthians 15, if I can find it here. There it is. 1 Corinthians 15. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Were you ever warned about that? Oh, you got to be careful who you're hanging out with. They're going to take you down. And there's some truth in that, isn't there? I mean, here's a girl. She's got her head on straight, going down a good road, and suddenly she gets connected with this group of friends, and boom, the next thing you know, her life is going sideways. The herd mentality is awfully strong. Reminds me of those Turkish shepherds and the story that came out recently in the Washington Post. A true story. These shepherds were having breakfast outside their small Turkish town. And as they were casually eating there, just having a good morning, they noticed something that absolutely stunned them and made their food kind of catch in their throat. As they're sitting there enjoying breakfast, one of their sheep, and they had a very large flock, it's a mountainous area, walks over to the edge of a cliff, very high, and just jumps off the cliff. And what the shepherds, as they were interviewed, said really stunned them is that 1,500 other sheep followed that sheep off the cliff. This really happened. The rest of the flock, one after another, just jump and jump like lemmings, each one simply doing what the one in front had done. Now, the good news is that only 400 of them died, thankfully. The rest of them, the other 1,100, the article said, landed on a big pillow of wool, basically, okay? But the shepherds were interviewed, and they talked about how frustrating it was. Remember, this is their livelihood. This is how they make a living, raising these sheep, when just one after another is jumping. And they said, we thought surely one of them will say, I'm not going to do this. Surely one of them would stop and say, I'm going to go a different direction. This is a bad idea. You would think at some point one of them would just stop it and go a different direction, but they don't. You know, negative influence in school can be a bit like that. Here's a guy with tremendous personal charisma, good looking, athletic. People like to be around him. But he has some destructive patterns, and like lemmings, classmates can sort of be jumping off the cliff with him, never asking, where is all of this leading? There's a great verse in Hebrews 10:24. It says, and let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds. And I love this verse because it's the flip side of this influence thing. Yeah, it can be for the bad, but the good news is it can also be positive, right? That says we can actually help each other be better. We can spur one another on to love and by the way, But you know that that's really a huge part of what church is about? Oh, I know we gather. We gather in chapel, we gather in church, wherever. We gather in a coffee house setting or wherever we gather. And we do that to worship God corporately. I get that. That's awesome. But do you know that one of the main reasons we gather is so that we can be better together? One of the big ideas of church is that by being with each other, we would actually get better together. We would actually help one another be better. Kind of like each other's cheerleaders. Woo, dude, I love what I see God doing in your life. Whoa, girl, go. Man, God is doing stuff in you. You know what? I've seen amazing changes. Don't grow weary in doing good. You're on a good path. And we cheer one another on. That's what Proverbs 13:20 is saying. But here's a third observation. I think this one is huge. The closer we walk with someone, the greater the level of impact. Boy, I hope while you've been at college, you've made some good friends. Maybe you're sitting by some of them today. But I tell you, friends are real important. You know, I sometimes say to young people, show me your friends, and I'll show you your future. And they usually roll their eyes, of course. I would expect them to. Because, yeah, that's an exaggeration. But only slightly. Friends are very impactful. A guy named Charles Tremendous Jones was a motivational speaker. No, he didn't live in a van down by the river, all right? Eating government cheese, okay? Like Matt Foley in the popular skit. Charles Tremendous Jones was the real deal. And he made a statement once that I will never, ever forget. He said, 5 years from now, you'll be the same person you are today, except for the people you meet and the books you read. He was simply highlighting the power, the transforming power of influence. Now, most of you have read some of C.S. Lewis or J.R.R. Tolkien's books. If you haven't read the books, maybe you've studied these things in class, some of the books, or maybe you've seen one of the many movies that are based on their books. Did you know that these guys were close friends? A group of guys that got together every Thursday evening at about 9 p.m. at C.S. Lewis's apartment on Oxford University campus. Every Thursday evening around 9, they gather with their teacups in hand and their pipes, and they brought the stuff they had written that week. They called themselves the Inklings. You know why? Because although they were very different as people, the thing they had in common is they were aspiring writers. And so they'd come and read what they had written that week, and they would critique each other and encourage each other and add comments and constructive input. It was awesome. And the Inklings were better together. At any one gathering, there might have been at least one philosopher, a medical doctor, several poets, a number of professors, but all of them wanted to be better writers. In her fascinating book called The Company They Keep, Diana Geiler tells about the profound influence these friends had on each other. And she makes it clear in her book that Tolkien, for instance, would have never, this blew me away, he would have never finished Lord of the Rings. It had been sitting for years, untouched, incomplete manuscript, unless C.S. Lewis and a few other friends came to him and said, look, man, this stuff is too good. The world has got to hear this. You got to get going on it again. And then and only then did he continue his writing. The Inklings were better together. Each rose higher because he had the others. That's how powerful the company we keep is. Now, obviously, the person we marry, if we choose to marry, has an enormous influence on us because it's typically the closest relationship of all. That's why that choice of a marriage partner is so important. In fact, one of the great frustrations that I pick up on as I talk to so many college students at our church, high school students, as I talk to so many singles in their 20s and 30s, I don't know if you guys get this, but there's a lot of frustration because how do you tell what's real about a person, right? I mean, you can read what's posted on the profile. You can read what's at Christian Mingle and what's posted there, right? But how do you know what's real? Because everybody's into image management, and people can present themselves as pretty ideal. So since people are into managing their image, what I want to do right now, and I know you're all going to want to take notes on this, I want to translate the personal ads and because phrases are used, and I need to give you their real meaning, all right? First, we're going to do the women, and then the men. Here we go. Are you ready? These are words that are often used, and I'm going to tell you what they really mean. Open-minded really means desperate, all right? I see many of you are now taking notes. That's good. Outgoing means loud and embarrassing. Continuous smile is a phrase I picked up. That means she does a lot of drugs. Okay? Your education is becoming complete today at Gordon. Beautiful means ditzy. Romantic means looks better by candlelight. Okay? All right, now let me translate the men's personal ads for you. Athletic really means watches a lot of NASCAR on TV. Huggable means overweight with lots of body hair. Here's one. It's written down a lot. Wants a soulmate. Stalker right there, I'm telling you. Good looking, arrogant, fun, annoying. And you just go through and you read these words, but you got to know what's real and what's not. Now, it's so good that we can laugh at that because it's funny. But you know, in a sense, isn't it really kind of sad too? And that's why it's so frustrating for so many single people today. Now, so if you're single and if you do desire to be married someday, I just want to encourage you to look for the right traits in a mate because the closer we walk with someone, believe me, the greater the impact. And so you know what? I'd like to envision that little story we started with ending differently. I'd like to envision that eagle blowing that joint, getting out of the barnyard and leaving turkeydom behind and soaring off into an unknown but very exciting future that God had designed for him. Why? Because he's an eagle, not a turkey. God's got a very exciting but unknown future designed for you. But trust me on this, nothing will impact you more than the company you keep. Father, may we help each other be better as we go today in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. You're dismissed.